Hello everyone, and welcome to this video where I'm super excited to present to you the newest update, the Pulleys update. Now this makes me super happy because I'm a structural engineer, as some of you know, and this is what I did all throughout university and continue to do on some projects. So this type of application, this invention, pulleys are extremely useful, and I will demonstrate to you in this video how they are. I'll show you some of the ideas that I have, some of the applications, and things that I'd like to see moving forward. So let's get going. From the Steam update log, you can see it's called the rope pulley update, and it pretty much says grab your block and tackle and start calculating your mechanical advantage. Rope pulleys are now in Stormworks. They work in a way you expect. A pulley allows you to rope a pass through with equal tension on each side. Pulling on one side will pull the rope through the other side. You can create an array of pulleys to create mechanical advantage with a block and tackle style arrangement, or just use pulleys to better design your cranes by separating your winch from the top of your gantry arm. So we're actually going to look into that in the video here. And what also is interesting is the ropes don't, they still kind of fall through your building or your creation. They don't have really substance. You could walk right through them, but they are using these sort of blocks to change the angle of your rope. So there's a U arrangement with the ropes on both sides and an L arrangement with the ropes at right angles to each other. They've also done some other fixes, the preset vehicles and things. So below we have notes here. So they added the new rope pulley block, and then all this other stuff that they did. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up and get going on the video. This is a screenshot I found on the internet, and it sort of explains basically what a pulley can do. So on the very left hand side here, you have a pulley and you have a load of 100 newtons in this case, kilograms, pounds, whatever. I mean, this is just a unit, but 100 unit, and you are pulling on this rope and you require 100 unit to pull this load up. So that's using a pulley just to redirection what you're trying to do. But you could also use it to a mechanical advantage. So this is what I was saying, what I learned in university, what I'm sure some of you already know, whether by trade and skill or just from university or school. But regardless, what you have here is now, if you have a load on a movable pulley like this, so the rope's attached on the top here, it's going through, now you actually require half the amount, because you're now distributing it on these two, and so on and so forth. But in essence, this is a movable pulley, and then you have this last one, the gun tackle pulley. So you have one pulley up at the top here, you have one pulley is mounted, attached, one pulley is movable, and the ropes sort of go through one another, and now you're pulling here at 50 units as well. So this system works to kind of redirect your pulling downward to pull this up. So in essence, this is just showing that you have to be pulling up, here you could be pulling down, and this load will still climb up. So these are just very basic examples, but of course things like this exist where you get into really complicated systems with pulleys attached to one another, etc., and you can vastly reduce the load which is required to lift certain things by having well-placed pulley system. There are tons of resources on the internet for finding a system that works the best, or a configuration that will give you the most mechanical advantage. So I highly recommend you take a look at that on the internet here. But of course, a variety of different configurations will lead to different advantages, and pretty much the way to calculate this mechanical advantage is to look at the number of ropes supported by the movable pulleys. So there's a formula for that you could follow, but in this case you have two pulleys. This rope and this rope are supported by the movable pulley, so our mechanical advantage is 2. In this case down here, which is more complicated, we have 4 movable pulleys, and if we count all the sections that are moving these pulleys, we get a mechanical advantage of 8. So this system will drastically reduce the load that is required from you to lift up this box. What does all this mean in Stormworks? Well, we'll get to that in a second, but first I just want to show you these two new pieces. This one's called a corner, and this one's just a pulley. This one's in a U configuration, and this one is actually at a right angle configuration, and you use them like this. Now I'll get to that in a second, but first I just want to say, before we had these pulleys, people would use systems like this, which would include a rope and a winch, and then just a fake rope doing nothing on the side. So in essence, when you pull up, yes, you lift your load, but that's not a pulley system. All it is a roof or ceiling mounted winch pulling this thing up. So that's not a pulley system. This is a pulley system though, and all we have here is a simple redirection. So there's no mechanical advantage here. You're literally pulling down with the same effort that you'd be required to pull up. The only advantage here is that, for example, you could have a massive winch on the ground and you don't need to have the massive winch up in the air. So you pull up here and eventually this box will start to rise because we are using the power of pulleys. This next case here, what is a test to actually determine if having two winches with two pulleys also is advantageous. And of course it is. You pull this load up here, now you're using 2 winches and 2 pulley systems. The thing that I did want to note with this example here especially is that this new update, or this sort of winch configuration, if you go here to the logic and the ropes, you could see all my things are attached, but you cannot attach the rope here to multiple winches. Now what I'm trying to say here is, if we take a look at our rope nodes, you can actually go ahead and attach this to here, and you could attach this to here. So you could have 2 ropes attached to the one node here. You can't attach one single node here, which would allow you to actually attach, for example, here and here, but you cannot attach one to this and one to this. It doesn't let you attach one rope anchor to 2 individual pulleys. You have to have 2 individual rope anchors for 2 individual pulleys. That's just how the game works. I guess a limitation, but regardless, you can make it work quite easily with that. And yes, I'm using all these, later on I'm going to be using this little segment of rope to attach to a rope anchor, but technically what I would do in this case is put some sort of like electrical connector or whatever that attaches to this directly, and you don't have to rely on the tension of the rope to sort of yank up and down on your load, which would be nicer. So I'm going to spawn this back up. So we did take a look at these 2 here. Again, this one being the one with the 2 winches and 2 pulleys. Now here we get into the first example that I was showing you, which is very similar to that one over there, but in essence, you're just redirecting the load itself. So instead of pulling downwards, you're pulling both upwards. With this all spawned in again, we looked at these first 3 examples, that one not being a real pulley. This one is a pulley that just redirects this in the downward direction, but there's no mechanical advantage here. Here you have 2 literal pulleys and 2 winches. Now here we get into the movable pulleys. So these were pulleys that were mounted to the structure, whereas this pulley is now movable. And with the movable pulley, you actually get a mechanical advantage. So if you count the number of ropes here are 2. So you actually do get a mechanical advantage on this one. And if I pull this up here, up it goes. And that pulley just sort of moves with the flow, and this goes down here. Now, in this example, we're using a rope system here. I'd probably put an electric connector here, an electric connector on whatever I'm trying to lift up, or even a magall maybe is better, and then you just lift it like this. But for this example, we are using this, although this here has tension, and it also kind of skews our results a little bit. But regardless, here you have this first example. This second example here is the gun tackle system. So you could notice here we are pulling this upward and pulling this upward, whereas the gun tackle configuration actually allows the winch to be located on the ground. So you have two pulleys, one pulley at the top that's fixed to the structure and one that is movable. And if we pull this up, you could see the gun tackle system working, and up goes the load. So here we have again a mechanical advantage of 2. Now we get into the more fancier stuff. Here we actually have a configuration with 2 pulleys on this sort of box here, and we have 2 pulleys up there that are fixed. So in this case, if we count the pulleys going through our or the ropes going through our pulleys, we get 1, 2, 3, 4. So you don't count this one here. So this is a mechanical advantage of 4. We go ahead and pull that. And again, we are still stuck with the tension on this piece here. But once all the ropes get tightened, up it goes. Now the disadvantage of having more ropes or more pulleys and ropes and everything, other than the obvious logical disadvantage of Stormworks, this causes more lag if you have more kind of floppy ropes dangling about, but not just a Stormworks disadvantage, but a disadvantage in real life. It's like gearing. So yes, it's way easier now for this load to be pulled up, but also it takes longer. So that's a real life downside of having more pulleys. Like if you had 8 of these things, you'll notice that it would take even longer. So on this example, I'm actually not using the U-shaped ones that you saw here, but I'm using the 90-degree angle ones. So it goes from this up to here, across this, and down. So in this case, this is no different than if we had this one here. So all we're doing is, instead of a simple U shape here, we're actually just using the 2 angled ones, 90-degree angle, to clear something. So this could be like a building or a vehicle or a bridge or whatever. So now we could actually lift a load on one side and have it stretch across an opening. So that is, of course, an advantage that I could see being used on ships and cars and whatever, buildings. So it's nice to lift up your load and have that space. So you could use a combination of all of this. Now, like I said, this is the real pulley. This still is a pulley, but it's a corner piece. So without having, so what it does is it lets you kind of redirect things. And what I was honestly thinking is you can have, for example, a truck pull a boat, like a small rib, out of the water upwards by using this 90-degree one, because you drive your truck in a horizontal direction and this redirects your rope in a vertical direction, pulling your rib out of the water as the truck moves in a horizontal degree. Now we looked at this one, and now the very last one is something that I was going to say that I really hope that the Stormworks developers implement. This is something that I talked about in my Discord server, but also something that I've been thinking about for a while. We have all these winches. I mean, we have the small winch here. We have 3 other configurations, the medium, the large, and the huge one. We don't have any mechanical means of rope, like pulling a rope. We only have electronic means, and by mechanical I mean manual. What I would really, really love to do is have something like this, where I could crank this and literally pull in a rope that way. So I think this is something they will add, if I had to guess, because they went ahead and added these awesome pulleys. That is something that really adds a lot to the game, and I believe having a manual operation that we can crank this and bring up, for example, a lifeboat, like a davit crane, literally a simple davit crane that requires, and all it would have to be is a winch, like a small winch with a crankshaft attached to it. In this case, I actually have a threshold gate and a torque meter, and the way it works is if I crank this and the RPS is higher than 0.7, it starts to lift this up. If it stops, it does that. Now what would be logical is you'd be able to use maybe E to pull up on this crank and Q to pull down. So you'd actually be pressing the different buttons, and this would be moving in a different direction, either up or down. So something like that would be awesome. Or if there's just a simple switch, maybe it's a two-piece thing, but it would just be really nice to have a manual way of operating now these pulleys. Because if you take a look at this, I'm just going to let this thing drop, you can see that as I hold this, the slack goes down. So really all you do need to have is the one direction, technically, of the davits, because if you just hold this, it'll drop. But anyway, what I wanted to show you is that this piece I could actually pick up. Like, it's not too heavy for the character to pick up and move around and stuff. And one thing that I didn't quite like is, yes, we're using this pulley system, but I still can't really lift it up. Well, actually, first of all, that's my own mistake right now. I have to just put the rope in and press R until I reduce the size or length of the pulley. There we go, 4 meters. Now if I pull that, you can see it kind of jumps up, but I don't really have like grip on my character to pull it up, which could be realistic. But if I do something like this and go to the one that has a very high mechanical advantage, if I pull that and of course reduce this rope to 4 and now pull, it kind of just yanks my whole character. So it's not really advantageous. It actually pulled me up, which I'm just going to let go now. But there's no nice way, I would say, to pull these manually. So whether we get a davit kind of hand crank that we could use to pull manually, because what I would love to do is have like a big truck, like a semi truck that just has a simple one of these, and I could crank up cargo onto the back, like not a semi truck, a pickup truck with an extended bed. So this would have a davit crane. If you look at any of those World War II style like massive trucks, the whatever they're called, the US Army trucks, they all have davit cranes that look just like this, like a little arm with a thing like this and a simple pulley that you could then pull up cargo onto the truck bed. So in addition to that, I would also love to see a way to manually attach a rope like this, and maybe just within our character here, press a button on the keyboard that will like use the character's arms to physically pull this rope in towards us. And I said this before in another video as well, where I said it would be great to be able to use the ropes to scale up something. Like for example, not in this case, but if you attach a rope to a rope anchor, you should be able to like climb up, for example, the side of a ship if you have this attached. And likewise, if you have a simple pulley where the mechanical advantage is making this weight block weigh less than our character. I don't know how much the character weighs, looks like not a huge dude, but whatever his weight is, that the mechanical advantage should make the weight of this less than our character. Then we can use the sort of pull the rope tool or pull the rope shortcut on our keyboard, and this should be rising. Obviously, if the mechanical advantage does not equal in this weight being less than us, if the weight is more than us and I'm trying to pull this cable, I'll just end up climbing up, because of course the weight of my character can't even bring this thing up. It's going to be dragging us up instead. So those are some simple things that I think would be awesome. Another thing that I would just really love, now that we've kind of opened up this door of pulley stuff, is I would love to have a smaller block of pulley, because as you can see here, this pulley, it's a 3x3 block, so it's 3x3, and this one's also 3x3. What I would really want to have is a 2x2 sized pulley, and I think that's the smallest we're going to be able to get, unfortunately, just because it physically requires a piece like this. But I would love to have now in the next update a pulley that is like this and a pulley like this. So and actually this wrong one, that's the one on the right hand side. So this one would look just like this with a little thing on the bottom. Okay, and this one would look something like this, maybe, whether like this or with a block, but it would have these two sides open where you can attach a winch and attach, or a cable and attach a cable, and change the direction. So I'd really want to see a smaller piece just because this is a little bit cumbersome to put on some of my smaller trucks, for example. Like I would love to have an Alta tow truck or something that uses a series of these to lift, but this is still fairly large. This is like the size for a crane or things, so industrial, but a smaller one would be a very nice advantage. But I can't tell you how stoked I am. I'm so happy with this update. Finally something, another engineering update, another engineering topic, and this is where I would use it. So take a look at this system I have. I have this huge winch, I think it's called, or large winch, huge winch, attached on the top of this sort of gantry. Now, I don't mind this system. It looks okay, but I would really have preferred, instead of having this thing up here, first of all, it weighs a lot. It weighs 400 units, which means that now I've brought up my center of gravity to here. So ideally, what would have happened is this winch would have been located like even here, and it doesn't even have to be in the center now. It could be wherever we want. And then all you'd have instead of this whole winch is you'd have a pulley system that would literally feed and drop your cable down like this onto this diving bell or mini sub or shark cage or whatever, and we would not have to have the huge winch located up here. And even we'd be able to have a mechanical advantage if I were to put a series of movable pulleys and systems, but even just a simple redirection. And probably for a redirection I would just use this corner piece like this, and then I could put my winch wherever. It could be here instead of this chair and be here, and literally as this moves around and about, you just use this pivot point to drop down and make this stuff work. So I'm not going to update the Avala with any of this because the Avala already has the winch there, and honestly it works fine. It works very well. But for some of my future creations, I definitely will be using the winch system to my advantage, both in visual cases, so just redirecting a cable, making it work, putting a winch in a more appropriate location, or for the mechanical advantage. But the mechanical advantage, I would love to really see the minifigure, I'm thinking Lego. I would really love to see the character, the avatar, our person, sort of be able to manually drop the slack or pull up the slack, so we wouldn't have to just rely on the winches. But of course relying on the winches is fine too. So look, in this case our winch is not centered, which is fine, except when I attach this ROV to this winch, what happens? Everyone knows what happens is the ROV will just no clip right through the bottom of the ship, and the cable will be sticking out right here. So instead of the cable sticking up there, and then when I go to pull up my ROV, it hits the bottom of the hull, it would be much better to have something like this. Now I could literally use this here and just chop a hole in the ship like this, do that, and it's now as simple as attaching this to here, and then attaching this to a node that I'm gonna use. Now, keep in mind that you cannot use cables for these pulleys. Now that's currently a significant disadvantage, and I would love to see maybe a cable pulley is what they could call it, and it could be like maybe more curved or have a different layout or shape, but it would allow you to actually wrap cables, because yes, ropes are awesome and they actually lift things up, but the cables are the ones that provide electrical power to all this. So this ROV, yes, I could lower it off to the side like that using this, but I can actually make it functional using this system. So that's the disadvantage, that yes, if I were to do this, connect it to here and connect this to my ROV rope anchor, I could just go lift up this ROV, chuck it off the side of the ship, and it's nicely going to be located on the side of the ship. But what sucks is the fact that I cannot really use the cables, so meaning my control panel in here, I still can't use a redirection or a pulley. I have to use the winch, and it kind of just goes right through the ship. So I would love to see smaller pulleys the system like 2x2 sized, and I would love to see ones that can work with the electrical cable and hose, because again, if I want to have a nice cargo ship like my Alta tanker here that carries sort of gas and diesel and oil, well, yes, I do have this crane that has these very cumbersome style tracks that actually does use a system that can pretty much put oil through this crane, but it would have been much nicer to just have a series of pulleys that can do the same thing. So they have the ropes and cables and the hoses. They all sort of have these anchor nodes and other things, but I think it would really be an advantage to have them all be able to function as the pulley, or just attach them to the pulley. Just the pulley maybe lets you attach all of the above, and the only disadvantage being if you've attached one of the types. So like, for example, you go ahead and put a rope cable here, you cannot then go ahead and put a electrical cable on this other side. So it would limit you in a sense that if you've placed one, like say I've gone ahead and attached it to a rope anchor, I can't go ahead and attach this to a cable anchor. It'll say, nope, you got to have the same ones. So maybe that's something they could program in and make just use of the exact same part. And if you're using it for all hoses, great. If you're using it for all ropes, great, or all cables, but not mixing and matching. That would make ships like this, and ship loaders too, that much cooler. So I'm super excited for the future. This opens up a brand new door of all kinds of opportunities that the developers can utilize. In my opinion, it points the game in the right direction, which is that direction of engineering, design, creating things, doing stuff like this. So that's really an awesome direction that developers have. Again, this is just the start, I feel, for this type of thing, and I'm super happy that they released it. So thank you, developers. As always, this is an awesome update. It gives us some really cool new parts and some really cool new mechanics, which I always love to see. So hopefully this gave you a good little starting point for all these pulleys that are now in the game. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more content, more creations, and as always, happy Stormworksing, everyone.